please make sure you go over to YouTube, subscribe, or you can always find us on any of the podcast platforms, and that's Fostering Change. Well, you know what? It's hard to believe that not only are we ending Foster Care National Awareness Month, which, by the way, for those of you who follow me, you know it's probably one of the busiest months for me out of the year. But we're also ending the season of Fostering Change. It has been an amazing season. I think I have a couple of more shows that might air in the beginning of June, but I am definitely going to be taking that hiatus this summer. But I was so excited for my next guest. You know, the fact is that in the last season, I cannot tell you how many books I've read, how many memoirs that I have read, a lot that I will tell you that some should never have been written. And I know you can send me the hate mail wanting to know which person I had on my podcast. I didn't like their book. I would never say that. But this book I actually really enjoyed. And so I don't get a lot of downtime. And when I did have some downtime in the last month, I actually was able to really read this book and not just skim through it. And so without further ado, Emi, welcome to Fostering Change.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
So I want to start right out. First of all, the book acceptance, 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 acceptance. I love how it's scratched out. I love the fact from, you know, somebody who grew up in this system and have my own story. What made you decide that it was time for you to write your story? Because let me tell you something, you're not just like any of my other writers. You're not somebody that has been sitting at home, not doing anything. I mean, you're highly educated. You are definitely one of not the percentage that we see where you've actually made it, and then you decide to write about it. So tell me, what made you do that?
I decided that I wanted to write this book when I was a senior in high school, right after I had submitted my college applications. Because, like a lot of young people who have a story to tell involving trauma and the system, when I was trying to apply for college, I had to find a way to summarize all of that in like 500 words. And that really felt like flattening myself. It was a really hard story to tell when I was still in the middle of it. And there's really only so much you can say in such a short space. And you have to make yourself seem like this perfect overcomer who has just been made stronger by everything that you faced, when that was not my reality. I'm sure that was not your reality, and that is not the reality for any child in the system or really any human being on this planet. So for me, this book was my chance to kind of tell the whole story. And it did take me a couple of years to really start writing it in earnest, because I had to get to a place where, you know, I had graduated college, I had a job, really where I felt safe to go back and dig through all of it.
No, so I remember when writing my memoir about, and by the way, you actually wrote your book, okay? I will be the first one. I've said this to everybody. I was fortunate enough to have Derek Jeter and Simon and Schuster back me. So I had a ghostwriter who wrote my memoir. But it was still thousands and thousands of hours, talking to this person who's telling my story. Did you feel that when you were writing your book that it truly brought some triggers back?
Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely. It was a lot to go through. I think in part because I really started writing personal stuff. Like, I wasn't writing a lot of fiction or poetry or journalism. It was really all that I knew. And so I just thought, oh, writing is extremely painful. That's just the way it is. And it was only a little bit later when I started writing about things that weren't myself or the child welfare system, when I was like, oh, that is kind of particularly painful to go through again and again and again.
Right, right. No, I feel that all the time. As a public speaker, I've told my story thousands and thousands and thousands of times. And every time I walk off a stage, I still get that little feeling of, that pain that we have.
Mm.
But I think it's so important, especially for our younger generation, for people to hear, because when I went into the system in the 70s, the sad part is that we're in 2024 and the system is no different. It is no different. And the fact is that the thing that I absolutely loved, that you actually, go to Harvard. Okay. So that is just like I said, you're the second person, and I'm 57 and I've been doing this for many, many years. You're only the second person that I've ever met, who's gone to Harvard, that has come out of our system. But, do you account any of that to the foster parents that you were given to, or do you count that because you talk about resilience, and you and will both get in that topic, but where did you get that grit to do that?
Well, I feel very fortunate in having an example from my parents, which a lot of people who are in foster care absolutely do not have. Where both of my parents did have 4-year college degrees. And my mom in particular, she graduated from a small satellite campus of our state school, but she had dreamed of attending Stanford as a girl. And so when I was growing up, we would be scraping ice off the car at 8 in the morning, Minnesota winter, it's pitch black outside. And my mom would be like, if only I'd gone to Stanford, I would be living in California right now. I would be a neuroscientist. I would be married to a doctor. My whole life would be different. And at the time, it seemed kind of delusional. And I think I tell that to people, and they're like, yeah, your mom had some issues. But I actually think she had a good point, and it was something that I grew up thinking like, oh, there is this magical place called an elite university, or even honestly any college campus, and you go there and all these doors open up to you. And it definitely, when I was in foster care, there was a lot of conflict with my foster parents because they did not have the same faith in college as a way out.
Right.
They thought I was using it to kind of avoid my problems. At the same time, they were really supportive of, me being able to stay after school to join a club, picking me up afterwards. They lived in a district where I was able to take advanced placement classes. And just that stability that they gave me, regardless of the conflicts we had or how
Right.
miserable I was at times, really having that full year at one school with one family was really a game changer for me when it came to my transcript and applying to college.
Yeah, but then you experiencing homelessness.
Yeah, yeah. And, unfortunately, that placement was not a placement that was going to keep being a good place for me. I had to leave, but I was in a very unique position where I got a scholarship to go to boarding school. And my social worker and my psychiatrist had really like worked together to kind of make this opportunity possible. And I also had support from my mom, who was still very much in my life, even though she couldn't take care of me. But then, of course, there were challenges, right? You're at boarding school, but there's winter break, there's spring break, there's summer break. And I was really struggling with, okay, where do I stay? And because this boarding school was out of state, and that's not like a traditional place for somebody who's been in foster care to go, I didn't have a case anymore. Like I couldn't go to respite care or, go back to the foster home where I had been living.
Right. Yeah. And that's the thing that I don't think people understand. And I talk about this quite often. Through our organization, we give scholarships out to kids, who want to continue their education, whether it's through a trade school or whether it's through. And the one thing that I always remind them is that, as long as I'm on the face of this earth, they're always going to have a place to stay because,
Mm.
we sit here and we're seeing this happening. There's this wave going across our country where governors are signing bills paying for kids in foster care for their education. But what we are forgetting to do is to really understand what are the wraparound services that these kids need. So, for instance, when the school does close in the summer, the school does close at the holidays, where do they go? And once you get into that shelter life, that is almost literally impossible for anyone, to get out of it. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, very much like you, when I turned 18, in the 80s, it didn't matter where you were within your schooling. You were out of the system. And I remember the fall of 1984, turning 18 years old, still a senior in high school, and be handed my trash bag and literally became homeless my entire senior year of high school. And I was one of these kids that was told I would never amount to anything. And what I did, where you went to college, I joined the United States Navy and made myself a very successful businessman. Somewhere you had to have that grit, though, Emmy. Where did you have that grit?
I have a complicated relationship with this idea of grit, in part because I think that we often really attribute it to an individual character trait that some people have and other people don't. And I don't have low self-esteem. Like I feel very proud of what I've done and how far I've come. And I also recognize that even though I had some really, really tough circumstances, I also had a lot of advantages. And I think it's important to really acknowledge some of those advantages so that you're thinking about, okay, how do we help kids and families? And how do we give people like a little bit more of these nudges? Right. And so I did have, an intact family for the first like 9 years of my life. I grew up with both parents who were married, and they had a very tumultuous relationship, violent at times. But I did have both of them, and I felt sure that both of them loved me even when they couldn't take care of me. And I also had a really strong faith, which became more complicated as I got older, but I really grew up with this idea of like, there is a God who cares about every single person, and like he has a plan for your life. And if you just like you don't know what obstacles are going to come your way, but if you just work hard and have faith, you can help make that plan happen. And I
Yeah.
think that that was a really, really powerful tool for me.
Oh my gosh, I love that because people ask me that same question all the time. They always ask me where I got my grit. And the thing that I always remind people is that I had a really deep faith. And even
Mhm.
though, how I was raised in foster care really wasn't all my kind of belief of where I felt my faith was, I had that faith of that higher power that was putting me on a track that I knew that if I continue, that is so crazy. Because I have not heard anyone, and by the way, I have been interviewing people for 5 years, and many, many people like you and I with lived experience, and I have not heard anybody say that like you did, because I was the same exact way. And I've had people ask me, how the hell could you have faith when you were eating out of a trash can? And I thought, the fact is that it was where I was supposed to be at that particular moment within my life.
Mhm.
And I'm the youngest of 10 kids. And so my brothers and sisters, we were all scattered out. And I look back and, I think about my siblings who didn't make it, who continue to blame the system and constantly. And I'm a person who says, don't blame the system. Let me help change the system. I really want to hear, what is your definition of resilience?
Ooh, what a spicy question. I love this one. I, for me, what I think of as authentic resilience is not bouncing back. It is not moving forward as if nothing happened. It really is being able to face what has happened and why it has happened and find ways to move forward with meaning. And
Wow.
often, I would say more often than not, that also involves other people, right? Finding ways to draw strength from your community and to recognize how we are not alone in our experiences as human beings. And I think all too often the child welfare system and other systems are really isolating. They make like I always felt like I'm the only person who's going through this. When
Right.
in fact, like you went through it, millions of kids are going through it. But I think it's really important to eventually recognize like, oh, there are systems in place that are influencing our lives. And not that we have to blame those systems, but how do we use what has happened to us to try to make that positive change?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I could not agree with you more on that. I really think that that is such a key, and what an amazing definition of resilience, because it is, to me, everything that you just said. The thing is that the system is shattered. There's no doubt about that. We know that, but there are some parts of the system that if we use it in our advantage, it can actually help us and help and be there what we need. I'm not a true big believer on, respite care, for instance. But you also have to understand that respite care is good for some kids and not for others. For me, I always felt like it was a punishment. It was like,
Mhm.
my foster parents are going away on vacation with their three biological kids, and they're sticking me in a stranger's house to scrub the kitchen floor. I always was just like, what did I do as a kid not to be able to go to Disney World so I think that how that part of it, but I do think that we all have the ability to make change. Everybody, the book is called Acceptance. It is definitely, hey, we are in beach season, and we all know how much Rob loves the beach and a good book. And this, my friends, I'm telling you, pick this book up. I have to ask you, when you got that letter from Penguin Press to say that they were going to publish your book, and by the way, the majority of my people that I've interviewed do a lot of self-publishing. It's very, very common nowadays. So for you to have Penguin Press, a well-renowned, literary agency, say that they're going to publish your book, what did you feel?
I really could not believe that it was happening, especially because by that point I had been working on the book for 5 years. And my editor who bought the book, we had been in touch for 3.5 years. And she had found my letter, like basically pitching this story in a slush pile with thousands and thousands of other submissions, and had been the person to say, like, hey, we can't quite take this, but could you make these changes? And I had met with her again and again, and it just seemed like this is never going to happen. The odds are always so slim. And so after I accepted the deal, I remember just calling her and both of us kind of being in shock. Like, I cannot believe that it happened this way. And
Yeah.
it also was my editor's very first solo book.
Wow.
Yeah, so we really
Wow.
went through this together. And since the book, she has become a CASA.
Oh
So
my
she's a
God, I
court-appointed special
love
advocate.
I love
Yeah.
casas. I love casas. I have 5 kids that we have adopted out of foster care. These 5 beautiful babies behind me on the wall. And we still keep in touch with quite a few of the casas because I think casas are just, to me, I feel like casas are the lifeline to kids in foster care because you get around moved around placements, social workers come and go, but that consistency of that casa, they are truly our angels on earth. So listen, everybody, once again, the book is Acceptance. Emmy, you were amazing. There was no other better way than I would have wanted to end National Foster Care Awareness Month. Everybody, I am telling you, pull up that beach chair, grab this book, and you will truly, truly, as it did for me, reading it and now listening to her talk, we almost are connected. So I just absolutely love it. Congratulations on the baby, by the way. And being a parent and take it from a dad, it is life-changing. It is absolutely life-changing. And I was just interviewing somebody earlier, and she's also just became a mother, and she also had gone through the system. And she said to me, Rob, she says, as I look at my little girl, she had a daughter. She says, I look at my little girl. She says, it makes sometimes me think about what I went through as a little kid. So I'm going to tell you right now, one thing I ask you to do is give yourself grace. Give yourself grace because you truly deserve it. Everyone, this is another amazing, amazing episode of Fostering Change. You know what? If you haven't done it, look into maybe being a CASA, look into see how you can mentor. But do me a favor. I see more and more people talking about foster care because we are everywhere. And it's important that people realize that and accept us. Until next time, continue to be good humans. Take care, everybody. Hey everybody, it's Rob Scheer, the founder of Comfort Cases, and thanks for tuning in to Fostering Change. You can actually watch a couple of episodes right here